It's great to be with you all this afternoon with these rock star teachers that are going to introduce themselves in just a little bit. But we wanted to take a little time to talk with these teachers because, in my mind, if we really want to preserve the legacy of Rosenwald Schools, then we have to get to our young people. If we don't get to our young folks, then what are we doing really? And so we wanted to spend a little bit of time with you all. First of all, I want to just tell you a little bit about who we are. I'm Christie Norris. I'm the Director of Education for the Department of Natural and Cultural Resources, which is one of the hosts of this event. I don't know if maybe the secretary spoke this morning. You might have told you a little bit about the department, but I just want to make sure you know who the department is, and then mainly, I want to let you explore with these amazing K-12 teachers some of the work that they are doing in working with K-12 students and sharing the rich history of Rosenwald Schools and Black education, some of their ideas for the interactive and hands-on projects that they're doing, and then some of the ways that they are engaging with communities. So if you are community members, hopefully you can take some ideas away. If you are folks who are trying to get young people to care about Rosenwald Schools, hopefully you'll be able to take some ideas away. And then we'll let you quiz these superstar teachers in the very end. So just really quickly, the North Carolina Department of Natural and Cultural Resources, we like to say we're the Department of Fun. All the things you love about North Carolina from A to Z, from the aquariums to the zoo. We are historic sites and museums. We are state parks. We are the African American Heritage Commission, who's put this wonderful two-day event on. We are the American Indian Heritage Commission. We are over 100 sites and programs all around the state. We are a lot. And you know, my role as the Director of Education, it's a new role, and I see my responsibility as opening up the doors of all of DNCR for every young person and every teacher all around the state. We want our doors to be wide open for learning. It is, and these guys might speak more about this, some of the toughest times to be a teacher in this state right now, and so we see it as our responsibility to help lift up and support our teachers in the really important work that they do. Our initiative for education at the Department of Natural and Cultural Resources is called Learning Happens Here, and that should give you the sense of what you all are passionate about, place-based learning. Learning happens here. History happens here. You don't have to go to Europe to find history. It is right here in our backyards. And so we want to cultivate our young North Carolinians to understand that. We have so many resources. If you have teachers in your life, please tell them about this. We have everything from classroom resources to lots of professional development for teachers, fellowships, engaging field trips. Again, I think the most important thing that we can all do is value our teachers, our K-12 teachers, treat them like professionals, remind them that they too are scholars. We do this with our university faculty. I think our rhetoric in the world sometimes does not do this with our K-12 teachers. And so we all need to make sure that we are supporting our local schools because our teachers and our public schools are the cornerstone, the foundation of our communities if we support them in the right way. I do want to tell you one last thing before we move into our content here, which is a really exciting announcement. Please tell the schools in your communities. Last week, Governor Roy Cooper announced a $1 million fund to reimburse field trips for public schools and public charters to visit any DNCR site around the state. We know how important it is to get our students out into the places and spaces where life happens. That can be so much more memorable and powerful than just being in a classroom. Not that the classrooms aren't great, and you're going to see some very powerful stuff happening in our classrooms. But this is a fund to make sure that every child, regardless of their background, regardless of their income, regardless of where they live, rural or urban, can get to a site and have a really experiential, engaging field trip. Tell everybody you know to apply for these funds. If students don't have enough money to cover lunch, it will cover that. If you need a charter bus, it will cover that. If you need reimbursement for a driver or a substitute, it's very flexible because we want to make sure that the barriers that teachers typically face to get places are removed. And as I said, that opens the door to over 100 plus locations and programs all around the state. So please tell all the teachers in your life about that. So before we dive in here, one of the things I just want to say, the story of Rosenwald Schools is so incredible and empowering, but as we all know, it's also situated in a time of what we might coin hard history. And the way that we define hard history is history that is what it says, can be hard to teach because it involves looking at our past and grappling with our past. It involves looking at the past that maybe isn't all sunny and rosy. It involves looking at the past that makes us question that concept of American exceptionalism. It's involving looking at the past that might involve trauma, injustice, as we know that Jim Crow did. And so one of the things that I do want to be really clear about in this world where there has been a lot of political rhetoric about whose history we teach and how we teach it, about what hard history is and what it is not. Hard history is not political. It is not bias or left. It is not indoctrination. Hard history can be taught without shaming and blaming students. These are all things that I think we hear in the news quite a lot. I would also say that teaching history, I mean, really, you say hard history, we're really just saying history, frankly, because what part of history has not had struggle? It's not anti-American to teach about the hard parts of our past, and it is not so-called critical race theory or CRT. That is not what we are talking about. That's not what you're going to hear. None of these teachers in front of you today are indoctrinating anybody. I promise you, if we could indoctrinate, the first thing we'd do is get them to put their names on their worksheets. Yeah, or get them to do their homework, right? Like, have you ever tried to get a teenager to listen to you? Good luck. There's no indoctrination, right? But what I do want to say is teaching this history, the history of Rosenwald Schools, the reasons why they were created, that we should celebrate, the agency and the resistance that took place to make this happen. This is necessary for our students to know. They have to be able to make those connections from the past to the present. I also think that history, and I know that these four amazing teachers agree with me, it's our responsibility to do this, to make sure we have a full understanding of where we come from. Otherwise, we're never going to truly be able to move forward. I would also argue that teaching history, hard history or any kind of history, is patriotic. When you love something, you work to make it better. You don't just say everything's great, let's move on, we're perfect. I mean, you know, these guys are perfect, but I think that we have to look at everything as a teachable moment. And so I say all of this to frame this conversation these guys are gonna have, just to remember when you hear those news blurbs or those sound bites, just think what we're actually talking about here. I often end up asking myself, what are we so afraid of? Why are we so afraid of history? What are we scared is gonna happen here? And so I think if this work is done in a way that elevates hope and empowerment, then this work can be done and it can be done brilliantly, and that's what you're going to see here today. We don't want to teach students all of the terrible and stop there, right? But we also can't teach students all of the wonderful and stop there, because one without the other is not the complete story. And so when we teach about our past and tell the truth and teach the truth, but in a way that is hopeful, in a way that empowers students, in a way that every young person can see themselves in empowered ways, that's a powerful history, that's a powerful teacher, and that's who you're going to meet here today. So, not to raise the bar on them, but I promise they are going to deliver. We have 4 teachers here. They're each going to share with you just about 5 minutes or so of what they are doing in their classroom today around North Carolina, They're going to each introduce themselves, share a little bit, and then once they're done, we can have a little bit of discussion. These are real teachers. You can quiz them. You can ask them questions. They speak middle school. They speak high school. So if you need that type of translation, you are in the right place today. So we're going to get started with Miss Cori Greer-Banks, who many of you, if you were here last night, you won. You know that she won or was awarded the Lasting Educator Award. So let's give her another applause for that. Cori.
Hello, everybody. I am so happy to be here in front of you today. My name is Cori Greer-Banks. I am an 8th grade teacher. I teach at the Explorer School right in the middle of downtown Raleigh on Hillsborough Street. And my mantra of why I teach 8th grade, which you guys are like, whoa, you teach middle school? It's funny, I always get that when I go to the grocery store. They ask me what I do or where do I work or how was work today? And I'm like, oh, I just got finished teaching 8th graders. And they were like, oh, I'm sorry. But I love it. I love the chaos. I think my brain is still in 8th grade mode. And why do I love this stage of development? I think this is the crossroads before they go off to high school and they're thinking about colleges and credits and all of that other boring adult things. And this is the last, year for them to really, really dig in and explore and wrestle and be a little bit uncomfortable and really stretch their thinking and learn. And so that's why I love being an educator. So I want to talk about one of my favorite lessons right in downtown Raleigh. So teaching at Explorers, we are a project-based school, so we're outside every day. Downtown Raleigh often remarks that they see Explorer students. We're a K-8 school, and from kindergarten all the way up to 8th grade, we're downtown. We don't have a cafeteria. Our building is really old. We don't have the newest, fanciest things. We're outside every day for lunch, for classroom, for lessons. And so place-based learning is really my thing. And one of my favorite lessons is a lesson I actually have out at the city cemetery. The city cemetery is about 9 city blocks from Explorer School. And every spring we walk to that cemetery and we give Anna Julia Cooper her flowers. And yes, thank you for the snaps because it's for real. Yes. So this idea of giving her her flowers was born out of the hashtag Give Her Her Flowers, where we honor Black women for the activism and all of the work and the hardship and the weariness that we put forth on a daily basis right up until recent. I won't say what was recent. I will just say 92%. But it's tiring. It's tiring, and oftentimes Black women aren't praised for the work that they do on a daily basis. It works on their body, on their mind. And so when I think of Anna Julia Cooper, and I think of Rosenwald Schools, and I think of that time period in Jim Crow, she is just a boss lady, and everybody should know who she is, including my 8th grade students. So we read excerpts from her book, A Voice from the South, and we learn about her background, about her being born enslaved and moving to Ohio and going to Paris. And, we learn the hard history, the hard stuff about Jim Crow, the lynching, all of the things that kind of make us very uncomfortable. And then they read excerpts of Anna Julia Cooper and her life, and they're like, whoa, this woman lived through all of this? And I'm like, yes. And guess what? She lived here in Raleigh, and she's buried 9 blocks from us. And you have to trick middle schoolers. You have to let them think it's their idea. So, I say that man, she's buried in Raleigh and her grave is right there. And we walk past it once a week when we go to lunch. And they're like, oh, Miss Cori, we have never went there. We must go visit. And I'm like, oh, you are so right. We must correct this injustice. And so, I've done it every year. So in the spring, we go there, and they read excerpts of quotes from her book, and we literally give her her flowers. Because, the kids noticed that, that city cemetery is largely it's not visited. And if you look in the back of your passports, you'll see Anna Julia Cooper's quote there. She is a pretty awesome woman. You need to dig into her and learn about her. And can I press play on this? And so we have students that go to her gravesite, they read quotes from her, and we literally give her flowers. Here's one from last year.
Oh, there's also...
The cause of freedom is not the cause of race or a sect, a party or a class. It is the cause of humankind, the very birthright of humanity. Anna Julia Haywood Cooper.
And so I have 78 eighth graders, and they all pick out a quote that, means the most to them, and they go and they read it out loud in front of the class, and we give her just due. I feel like it's overdue. I feel like more people should know who this woman is, who has shaped this state during one of the most turbulent time periods in American history. But you know what? It has to start somewhere, and so I'm glad that it starts in my class. My class, my eighth graders, they're so they get riled up, and I like to see it happen. I just sit back and watch. And so we also walk to the Capitol building because, like I said, we're right downtown. We don't have a lot of resources, and so we're out and all around downtown Raleigh. And one of the places we always walk to kind of daily for lunch is the Capitol building. And if you've been at the Capitol building, you know that there are still Confederate monuments. There's still a monument praising Governor Aycock. And they, in learning about Anna Julia Cooper, they also learn about Governor Aycock as well. And then after, reading Anna Julia Cooper and reading about Aycock and the 1898 riot, they get very riled up. And so this is a group of my eighth graders. This picture right here, let's see, on the left, and these are my America 250 service learning group, and they are talking to Dean Eatman, and they are demanding that Governor Cooper put forth money to build a statue for Anna Julia Cooper and to take down Governor Aycock's statue. And they wrote letters to him. I'm like, this is going to take a long time, and it does not just happen. But they, I like that sense of empowerment. They feel that there is something they can do, and they want to do it. And I think that's where we want to go with middle schoolers. We want them to feel empowered. We want them to feel that there is always something that we can do, and we can always work toward that. And that's what Anna Julia Cooper did.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. Man, I wish I was in your middle school class. That sounds so much fun. My name is Jamie Lathan, and I'm the Vice Chancellor for Extended Learning at the North Carolina School of Science and Math. And you may see me look down, I have notes here. But in this role, I help to coordinate and lead a lot of outreach programs. But it was very important for me in that more administrative role to still be allowed to teach. And so I can teach one course a year, and I love it. I am a social studies teacher and a history educator sort of at my professional core. So I do teach one course, and that course is an African American studies course. So when I teach the course, I tell the students that I'm learning with them, right? And I'm learning from them. And that's very, very important to me. And I also tell the students that as we're on this journey, this intellectual journey, it is intellectual for me, but it's also deeply personal. It's a personal commitment and a personal connection. So in terms of teaching the Rosenwald Schools, I'm always amazed at the commitment to education and the commitment to future generations that the students, the Rosenwald students had, the teachers, and the entire community. I tell my students that if it wasn't, for them and what they did, I wouldn't be standing, I wouldn't have the opportunities that I have. A bit more personal, so both my maternal and paternal grandfathers never I think my maternal grandfather got to the 6th grade, and my paternal grandfather got to the 3rd grade. My grandmothers, I think one may have graduated high school. I'm not so sure about that, and then the other did not. My mother did not. She graduated from high school, and then my father was the first in the entire family to attend college. And so this is rural South Carolina. Now, I don't know for sure. Now, all of my parents and grandparents, the schooling that they did have was at all black schools. I'm not sure that if they were Rosenwald schools or not. But it's when I teach this stuff, it's deeply personal. So going to the first slide. So I want to give you a context for my classes. Well, the majority of my teaching career has been in face-to-face brick-and-mortar schools. But I've also taught like 40% of my classes in virtual settings. So this is the NCSSM Connect program. So I'm standing in that one slide, and that's like 20 years ago. But I'm standing and I'm still teaching that way now, in a studio on our Durham campus, and we broadcast out live every day to public school, high school students across the state of North Carolina. So it is an amazing opportunity for me. So we don't just we do that daily, but then I also have a chance to visit my students. So I really discovered North Carolina through teaching in this program. So I've had students in Ocracoke, students in Duplin County, students in Warren County, students in Northampton, students all over the state, in which I have loved. But it's because they come from all over the state, it's very important for me that the history that they learn is both local and statewide. So if you go to the next slide, so I'm sure some of you have seen this map, but this is a map of the North Carolina Historic Preservation Office of the location of the Rosenwald Schools in North Carolina. And the reason why I show you this, and you can probably guess it, is because I knew in teaching this era, in teaching the era of early 20th century African-American history, there was not a place in the state, no matter where my students were located, that a Rosenwald school wasn't within a close proximity. So that's going to then lead to, next slide, my first assignment. So this is an assignment that I can't say that my students got really excited about, but I was hoping that they would. But I put my students into groups and had them research and create presentations about Rosenwald schools. Now, we had already had discussions about Du Bois and Booker T. Washington, and we set all that context up. But they were to present on a Rosenwald school that was in their hometown or in a nearby surrounding area. So the document on the left is a 23-page listing of all the North Carolina Rosenwald schools and their locations. So with this information and the books I provided and internet research, the students found out some really interesting things about the Rosenwald schools in their area. And these presentations, again, were part of a larger unit on looking at African Americans in the early 20th century. So then going to the next assignment. So this is not the same set of students, because they wouldn't have liked me at all. So this is a different class, different year, different set of students. So instead of doing the presentations, I had them do what's called the documents-based essay. And that's kind of a typical format for AP humanities types courses. So I gave them the opportunity to write a documents-based essay, and I provided them with 9 primary source documents about Black education in the early 20th century. So, and to write this essay, they had to answer a question, and the question asked them to draw on the historic trends of Black education to contemporary challenges of Black youth in public schools. And they had to use 8 of the documents that I provided. Now, one of the documents had the history of Rosenwald schools, and 2 of the documents are here. One I really like, I liked all the documents. One is from Charlotte Hawkins Brown, which you may be familiar with her, wonderful female educator, awesome, love, another boss. But she began Palmer Memorial Institute in Sedalia, North Carolina, And I just love, she listed out a whole bunch of rules, and I just provided a couple of them. But I love, when you look at these rules, you can see that Charlotte Hawkins Brown had very, very high expectations for her students, for their academic excellence, and for their behavioral excellence. So the assumption was that these students, you can do this, and you are a scholar, and when you get to my classroom, you need to act as such, or when you're at the school, you need to act that way. And then the other document, and again, there were, 7 other documents, but the other one was from a 2016 study by the North Carolina Public School Forum called Study Group 16. And the Public School Forum facilitated kind of a meeting of all the educators and other thinkers to think about lots of things involving education, but in particular, racial equity in schools. And from this chart, we see that there's a low representation of Black students in academically or intellectually gifted classrooms. Now, this is back in 2016. I will say that now in 2024, it's risen a little bit to like maybe 18 to 20%, but still, the connections, my students were able to make really astute connections and observations between the perceptions of Black youth ability from Charlotte Hawkins Brown to who's making the decisions about who's in AIG and who's not in North Carolina today. So I think if it was Charlotte Hawkins Brown, every single student would be AIG. There would be no such thing because we expect all students to be at that level. But here, in 2016, we see disparity, right, and inequity. And so my students were able to make some really, really great observations of that. So overall, in both of the assignments, my students learned about the Rosenwald Schools and how they were, they demonstrated African-American communities' belief and value given to education. And you might think, well, of course they did, they were schools. Well, for me, with the students that I had from all over the state, right, we were combating some old myths and narratives about African-American students maybe being anti-school, or the narrative or the myth that to do well in school is to quote unquote act white. And this is not that. And so a big part of kind of my teaching is sort of, and some students, and from, not all, but some students, you have to sort of unlearn some behaviors and say, no, there's a strong history, strong intellectual kind of history in African-American communities. So that's part of it. Lastly, my students were able to learn that these school buildings, these Rosenwald schools, and the Russell School is actually 5 miles from where I live in Durham now, but they served as sort of tangible reminders of the Black community's resilience and their commitment to education despite the racism and segregation that they face. So Rosenwald Schools are very important in my teaching, and I'm grateful for the opportunity to share a couple of the lessons with you. Thank you.
Ooh, that's a tough act to follow. Hi, my name's Simonae Williams. I'm so honored to be here today amongst these titans in education. I'm kind of the baby in education here because I did a few things before I got here. I was a professional soccer player, I was in law enforcement, and then, oh, let's just be an educator. That sounds like a good thing to add to the list. When I think about my why in education, I really have to acknowledge in my educational journey a void where I can't regale you with colorful stories of classroom experiences because I didn't have them. So I really aspire to be the teacher that I always wanted. And I really believe that it's our duty as educators to teach the whole child and send them out into this world better than how we receive them. When I think about my project, we can go to the next slide, that I did with them in preserving the past, the Rosenwald School has a different kind of connection for me in that a lot of my family members on my husband's side attended these schools in Warren County, North Carolina, specifically the Warren Training School. And it's funny because I see some back there that are members of that community, and my husband as well with the Hex Grove community. So at the end of a 3-week-long PBL project, and for those of you who are not familiar with PBL, that is project-based or problem-based learning, the unit goes through kind of causation for the Civil War itself, and then radical Reconstruction. The end of Reconstruction, it's like, well, where do we go from here? And the only way is up. So as you can see, my students take on this extensive project in groups of 4, and I teach in something called the gradual release model, where when we start the unit is very heavily teacher-led, and I'm doing a lot of lecturing, and by about day 5, they're driving the lesson on their own. It's hard for a teacher sometimes to release control to students in the classroom, especially 8th graders, and I'm going to reiterate a lot of what Cori says about it. 8th graders, they are a special kind of crazy because they're not quite mature enough, and then they're simultaneously the maturest people you'll ever meet. They're little adults and they know everything and they don't need your help at all. So when we look at this Preserving the Past project, I kind of put them in the place of the historical architect, and they have to figure out first, what are they preserving? What are these histories that they're going to tell, and from what communities? Because we use the Rosenwald construction map. They're always like, well, I don't know what to pick. And I'm like, well, North Carolina's got 400 options for you. So we take a look at those ArcGIS maps. And as I've been sitting here, I'm noticing we're all using a lot of these same materials that are provided by DNCR and the public library. Then they have to figure out, well, what's going to make it into my exhibit? What's going to make it into my building or structure that I'm putting up? They have to write the narratives of those histories. And then finally, they have to build and present that information to an audience, which is, of course, their classmates. When I look at the images, the young man in the hat is the mayor. He is tasked with creating a speech to convince the community, hey, support this school. He also has to write a grant requesting money. Then the young man sitting next to him is the CFO. He has to create the budget list and the expense report. How much is this gonna cost? How much do we need to spend to keep this up? Or even what skills within the community do we have that we can harness to, sustain a building like this? The young lady sitting to the side is the teacher in this Rosenwald school. She has to come up with a daily schedule. She'll have to write a curriculum and a lesson plan. And I remember when she came up to me, she was so excited. She's like, look at this lesson plan. I have all these things. And I was like, there were no computers, dear. They had actually very, very detailed lesson plans, and it was funny because they kind of looked like the things that I was teaching them. And I'm like, no, you have to take a step back and put yourself in the shoes of somebody who maybe had never read a book. Maybe they've never written a word. And she's like, what am I gonna do? And I was like, A, B, C, D, E. And I was like, sometimes we have to be that basic. You're working from kindergarten up, and as they get older, then you're gonna have the more intensive, lessons. And it's funny because they just couldn't believe people weren't literate, because they're like, is that a thing? And I'm like, this is why we step back and we put ourselves in people's shoes so we understand where we need to meet them at to bring them up to where we are, right? The last one is the architect, that young man at the end who is responsible for actually building it. As you can see, there are boxes all over my room. My room is loud and it is messy, and most times people run in like, is somebody fighting? Oh no, Williams is just projecting. My room is definitely what they call the party room. And they said, if Miss Frizzle was a real life person, then it's me in my room. At the end of this project, as you can see all over the tables, once students complete all those tasks, they have to present. And I give them about 30 minutes on the last day to kind of get together as a team and make this presentation. The good thing about PBL is they have full autonomy to really figure out, well, what is my communication style? Am I a presenter, like we're sitting in front, walking around the classroom, giving out handouts, or am I somebody who wants to do a slideshow and I want to work for a slideshow? It really is true differentiation. And I think that is very difficult for teachers to figure out, well, how do I really differentiate instruction in my classroom? Well, as you can see, and you look at the houses there, or the schools, some are very small, some are very big, some went for a single, one class, and some built the whole Tuskegee Institute up there. But it really allows the kid to be exploratory. Once they present their project, the class votes, and we give a thumbs up or down on whether or not we're going to approve their grant. One of the other things that's really important about project-based learning is the self-reflection afterwards. What were those glows? What were those grows? What could we have done better? How did we work well as a team? And then, more than anything, how did I do? And I allow them to grade each other. And I take their grades very seriously. It's the grade of the project, it's the grade of the presentation, it's how they grade each other. It's hard because they're 8th graders, and I have to say, you cannot grade them based on how you feel about them. You must grade them on whether or not they completed their task well. And there are some times we get into well, I didn't like his attitude. And I'm like, but his attitude produced the correct work? Then you have to give him a 100. One of the things that I did create at the bottom, you see a Rosenwald teacher toolkit. I have pulled my lesson plans, the rubrics, really everything, the things that DNCR provides, the things that NCpedia provides, the things that the North Carolina Library provides all in one space. So anybody who takes this folder is more than welcome to use it or put into practice in their own classroom what it would be to preserve a Rosenwald School and be the historical architect.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Matt Scialdone. I teach at Middle Creek High School here in Wake County. I teach African American literature, and I also am super excited to be teaching as a profession. We have North Carolina's only second 4-year comprehensive program for high schoolers who are thinking about becoming teachers. And I don't know if y'all have noticed, but we need some teachers. So I'm excited to work with young folks and bring them into this profession that I really love. In terms of my why and how I got into this, I come from a family of civil servants, and given my skill set, this is my way that I can serve my community. Also, I find that I enjoy the company of young people better than most adults. They still have lots of energy and idealism, and I have infinite patience for them, so I really love getting to spend time with kids. So in my African American Lit course especially, I have found over the years that, before I move into a text that I'm going to be studying with my students, I had to give them the historical context for that text. And they were oftentimes far more interested in the historical context than the text that we were about to move into. Also, I saw that they had a lot of holes in their learning, particularly about history, African American history in particular, and I realized we got to fill in some of these gaps. So I found my literature course becoming very history oriented. So in that course, of course, I'm going to teach Booker T. Washington, and I start with the context of telling them about the Rosenwald Schools, and that had the lean. That had the engagement. That had the kids being like, wait, what now? And tell me about these schools. And I found, we had to kind of rush through the text by Booker T. Washington because they wanted to really learn about the Rosenwald Schools. So we started going backwards and learning about Rosenwald Schools, and that's when we started talking about, hey guys, we have some right here in our area. So we started creating some partnerships, and the first one that we worked on is the Holly Springs Elementary School up at the top. So kids at my school helped to write the text of what you see on that marker right there. They work with community partners, they did research in the archives, and they helped to put that together. They participated in that. And that's a recreation center now where that Rosenwald School once stood. But my kids play ball at that rec center. And when they go there and they see that sign, they know that they did something in class that's more than just a worksheet that I graded that then went in the trash can. You know, I have kids that tell me, I'm gonna bring my kids and say, I did that. You know, so I really want to encourage my kids to engage in their community as much as humanly possible. So that kind of started a mission for us there. Christie, if you wouldn't mind, if you would go to the website. So kids being kids, you know, I said, guys, how are we going to get the word out? So the historic marker was one thing that they did, but then they said, you know, we got to get some stuff online about this. So the students, they interviewed folks that actually went to that school. They gathered letters from students who had gone to that school, and they put together this website that if you just Google search Holly Springs Rosenwald School, this will probably be one of the first things that comes up. So you'll see on the page here, you have everything from a timeline, and everything you're seeing is student created. The adults, my role as an educator, my line is I light the fuse and run. Get out of their way. You know, the kids, all they need is to be pointed in a direction, and they'll be fine, and they just need some guidance along the way. So there is everything up here from the history there is a quick timeline. You see the letters there. They gathered letters from students, former students of that Rosenwald School. The interviews down the end. Kids, this was done during 2020. So, you know, this is in the height of COVID, and they did all of their interviews online, and we got folks on Google Meets, and the kids they worked together to come up with a script of questions that they knew they wanted to ask all of their interviewees, and then we compiled them together, and you can watch interviews with folks who were students at those schools. So this was our jumping off point. This has been the thing that got the kids interested. Christie, if you wouldn't mind going back into the slide deck. So in the lower left corner there, that's another historic marker that kids work with community partners on, and that's for Apex Elementary, Apex Consolidated High School. If you know Apex, what was Apex Middle School, where that school is now, Apex Middle, was a Rosenwald school. We got to go to their class reunion. And we set up an interview station, and we interviewed students, former students that went to that school. The Apex Consolidated story is really interesting because it is one of the few times in the history of integration in North Carolina that white students integrated into a formerly black school. That very rarely happened. And it was because that Rosenwald building was one of the last ones that was built, and it was built using brick. And, you know, there not many of the Rosenwald buildings were made with brick. It was actually in far better condition than any other school they had available in the area. So white students actually integrated into that space. And it was very successful. That Apex community was very, very tight. And we had interviews of black students and white students sitting together talking about their experience when the school finally integrated, and I believe that was in '71, which is a full 16 years, 17. I mean, I'm not a math teacher after Brown, but when we finally got around to actually integrating the schools. So that's another one that we have worked on there. And in the lower right, that's what the class, when I get my African American Lit classes in the spring, this is what the work we're going to be continuing on. That is the picture of our namesake Rosenwald School. There was a Middle Creek Rosenwald School. And I don't know if any of y'all have done, some deep dives into the Fisk archives or some of the other archives. It's tantalizing information, but it's also very incomplete sometimes. It is super frustrating that we have that photograph, but we don't have the actual physical location. We have the whole paper trail of that they paid for all the supplies to have it built, but we don't have the actual location. You know how a lot of times in those archives it'll just say, in the vicinity of. So we have conflicting reports from some of our elders in our community about where it might be, and we're trying to triangulate that information. And we are hoping to one day put a marker on the spot where that building stood. We know it stood for about 8 years, and it changed hands a number of times along the way, but we're trying to find it now. But this is just something that as an English teacher, you would think like, well, what does this have to do with your teaching English? This is a literature class, but I'm teaching research skills, and we're reading and we're writing. All of it lines up to standards. And these kids are far more fired up about this than a poem that I might put in front of them that they might have a hard time connecting directly to. Whichever class it is that cracks the case, when they find that building, I am never going to hear the end of it from those kids. They are going to be so fired up, and when that marker goes up and I hear another batch of kids say, I'm going to bring my kids here and show them what I did. That's what I'm trying to do every day with my kids. So, thank you very much.
So, does anybody have any, we have real time for questions. Does anybody have any questions for these amazing teachers here? And thank you again to all of them. I hope it gives you the hope it always gives me to hear from teachers like this, that this is what is happening in North Carolina's public schools. This is what is happening in North Carolina's public schools. Great things are happening in North Carolina's public schools. So thank you all for that. Yeah. Do you want the microphone, or do you have to?
I can do that.
I can repeat it to you.
My question has to do with format, because I noticed we have 2 charters, school science and math, and thank you that you finally showed up on the end there, but I was wondering, is it harder to get a class taught in traditional public schools that is not in the, I'll call it curriculum, established curriculum?
Well, so first I will say this is in the established curriculum. Let's keep that in mind. Like, every teacher should be teaching this and should be teaching in this way. So I will just say that, even after all that fuss about the new social studies standards, this is in the curriculum, but I'll let y'all answer that on how you feel.
I'll start off. Explorers is not a private charter. We are a public charter school, and so we're held to NCDPI standards of study. We are audited at the end of every year. We still have to take the EOGs. We have to adhere to all of the rules that are established by the state. So we pride ourselves that we are a public school. We're small, we don't have a lot of resources. We're a Title I school, but we are a public school. One of the projects that my students did that I'm very proud of a few years back is that they dug in and did research on the demographics of Wake County, and they compared it to the demographics of Explorer School. And they uncovered some pretty startling findings. I saw it as soon as I came into Explorers. That our demographics in 2017, this project was 2017, did not match the demographics of Wake County. This was a student-initiated project, student-led, and this was in 5th grade. It started in 5th grade, and it encompassed all of the middle school. I wish I could show you the little pie charts and bar graphs that they came up with, and they broke it down in their math classes how much more white their Explorer School was in comparison to the demographics in Wake County, and they went about to do something about that. And so after they put together their charts, presented it to the class, they said, we got to do something more. And they took their data to the school board, and they presented that data and their desires to be a school that reflects Wake County to the school board. And the school board was appalled. I don't know why. It's apparent to me. And the kids called it out. We read stuff like this year. We're reading How to Be a Young Anti-Racist by Greer-Banks Kendi. But they read how they came to the conclusion that Explorers was a white flight school in 2017. When you have children that say that to the adults, that should make the adults stop and reflect. You know, this school was created in 1997, and we have the students that attend the school say it is a white flight school. And they presented recommendations to the school board. And as a result of that student project, we changed our lottery system. As a result of the data they presented to the board, they changed the entire way that they admitted students into that school. And so when I say those kids are doing the hard work, the legacy of Rosenwald, we are walking. We're walking our talk.
I'll piggyback on Cori here in the toolkit, there are 7 standards that I included in that toolkit on the lesson plan, where that is actually written into the curriculum. It is very specific to North Carolina in the fact that it's North Carolina history, so you're gonna see that as well. But I wouldn't say that in any way, shape, or form, state, public, charter, private, wide, this should not be taught, or this is not what I would have characterized as one of the more controversial histories. Even though it piggybacks on the end of one, this has not ever garnered any kind of negative attention that I would ever think or characterize as problematic.
I think at the heart of your question is this being taught in just traditional public schools? And I think that question comes down to who the teacher is. I think because of all the rhetoric that I referenced, what I have found in the teachers I work with, regardless if they're public charter, private, that conversation has made teachers very afraid to teach in the way. She said she's using How to Be a Young Anti-Racist in her classroom. That is not happening in most charters or traditional publics, because now these guys are lucky, they're at charter schools that are doing what charters were designed to do. Not all of them are. And so I think what I would encourage all of you to do is, if you think this is the type of instruction that should be happening in your traditional public schools, your public charters, let your school boards know it. Because the problem is you have folks from the other side showing up and fussing and banning books and pitching a fit to try to stop the types of things that they're doing. Does any of this feel dangerous to you or wrong to you? I think it's brilliant what these folks are doing. This is what our school teachers are trained to do. We just have to let them do it. So I think it's a great question. This is what DNCR wants. You know, this is what we're trying to help teachers to do, for sure.
And I'll kind of jump on that too, that, you know, like Jamie mentioned about learning with your students, right? I mean, teachers, I think most teachers default to teaching what they were taught, how they were taught it. If teachers didn't learn it, they can't teach it. And as mentioned, if you look at the standards, Wilmington 1898's in there. But if the teacher never learned it themselves, they can't teach it. And a lot of the stuff that we're talking about here today is in the standards. It's just the problem is a majority of the teachers, myself included, I'm learning along with my kids. I'm learning what my kids need to learn and want to learn. So I think more than any, and then the pushback, and there is eventual pushback, but I think that to me is the even bigger hill that we've got to climb, is making sure that our educators have this ground underneath their feet, because if they don't, there's no hope for them to share it with the kids.
And my ultimate goal is to get what I'm doing in this public charter school, and I would love it to be taught in every public school in this state. That is going to take admin support. That's going to take statewide support. And I have to be honest, we don't have that across the state. We have some teachers, if they taught in public schools the way I teach in my little downtown school, they would be fired.
Yeah, my name is Dion Brooks. I'm with Stanley Avengers out of Stanley County. And if you don't have a card already, there's a QR code on the back. We have 3 documentaries on what I call the mystery behind his story and my story of Kingville. So with our organization, we've actually found out the entire black community that was, after integration, I'm from Albemarle at the time, so it was renamed South Albemarle. And and that was in 1967. So for over the last 50 years, the whole Kingville thing has been a myth until the Stanley Avengers came into play, and we found where a whole campus for Rosenwald Schools, and I promise there's a question at the end of this, right? There's a 4-room teacherage, and there's an industrial school that we're looking to preserve. So the good news is the owners of the establishment, they're with whatever, do what you gotta do, Dion. I'm with you on the tax credit for if you can get this done. But let me back up and say, congratulations last night on the award, Cori, because a lot of talking about the Rosenwald Schools. However, in the words of Booker T. Washington, he said, teachers' homes and teacherages were similar to the schools in concept, style, and design. They're an important part of Booker T. Washington's overall educational concept. Washington dictated that the teachers' homes should be comfortable but not expensive, was to be a model for the mothers of the community. Additionally, he advanced that the kitchen, back porch, dining, living room, and front porch be arranged so they could be used for large community gatherings. So the actually porches were podiums, right? So my long-term goal is that the teacher still stands. There's a 4-room, it's been converted to apartments, which was easy because if 4 teachers live there, it's easy to convert it to 4 apartments, right? So the city was looking to demolish it because the safety hazard is, it's a drug-infested community. Right next to it is where they sell fentanyl, right next to it. And the 4-1 teachers, we're looking to convert it into an art, trade, and a STEM, and a mental health facility in those 4 rooms, right? So when we push the agenda to preserve the teacherage and the industrial school, I was posed, well, let me ask you this. How would you respond to someone saying preserving a teacherage without a school is like preserving a parsonage without a church?
If you're preserving any part of any history, I'm for it.
I would like to make a comment on what you said, and also in addition to what the question was asked prior to that. I want to remind us that one of the things that has been focused consistently about Rosenwald Schools, that it's about community, and that's key. And that's what's involved in everything we are talking about. One of the things that's required in a charter school is involvement from community. That's not in the public school system. That's a major difference. The Rosenwald School had that. And so you're looking at schools, most of us who look at schools when we were there. I want to encourage you, find out when was the last time you've been in a school, so that you know what's going on there. In the Rosenwald situation, the public was involved. The community was involved. So the question you were asked about the diversity goes back to your county, goes back to your school board. We have a lot of folks on school board who know nothing about education or school, and that's on us. It's all political, and that's what we're going to have to do the work.
You know, there's something that I say to my children all the time, and I say, as we're pouring into you, it's admin's job to pour into us, and it's the community's job to wrap their arms around the school. And that's how we nurture these children to be the best versions of themselves. I'm going to be very transparent here. I did leave the state because I didn't feel supported by the community. And I stepped into a 740 K-8, and there is so much involvement. We had a 340 participant fall festival. There were cakewalks, and there was candy, and there was all the fun things that I always ever wanted as a student. And what's unfortunate is I love public education. That's where I started. I started in Warren County. I worked with Miss Williams back there. They couldn't get the Williamses right when we were together. And I love those children. And she'll tell you, I poured into that community. We had homecomings and we had, proms, but Warren County did wrap their arm around. That was the biggest parade we marched down that street. And I think what makes me sad in this shift is we've lost that sense of community. But as its elders, we are the community elders. We have to show our children, what does it mean to build community? What does it look like to be a community member? And I tell my children all the time, I can meet you halfway, but I can't love this more than you. I can't work harder than you gonna work. I can't give more than you're gonna give. I can meet you halfway. We can do it together. And that's what's made the space that I'm in currently so successful.
And I think just to center us back here, we could, the charter versus traditional public, that's a debate, that's a whole other conference. But I think ultimately what we want is this type of instruction in every school. What Dr. Newkirk was talking about, that sense of community, we need that in every school. Governor Roy Cooper declared 2024 the year of public schools. And yet, we just had his veto overridden, and we're sending millions of dollars in vouchers to private schools. Are we going forward or are we going back? Millions of dollars that other folks were saying this could go to Western North Carolina. We're still recovering from a devastating flood out here. And so I think there is a lot happening that is an attempt to dismantle public schools, traditional, charter, all public schools. And it's going to take us collectively to show up and support our local schools, to be part of these communities, to get in these schools. If these people fussing at school board meetings and banning books were in their public school, they would see there's no indoctrination happening in schools. These are the folks in public schools. But there is a propaganda campaign out there, and we're being led to believe things that just aren't true. Amazing things are happening in North Carolina schools. Is there work to be done? Absolutely. But our public schools aren't failing. We are failing our public schools. And so I think if you leave with anything, how can we support all of our teachers to teach in this way that these 4 teachers have shared with us today? Because this is an exhausting job, and y'all are at the end of the week. You've probably been up since 5 in the morning, grading papers till 10 o'clock at night, all of that invisible labor that we know that you have. And so, I think get out there, support your schools, drop off a box of Dunkin' Donuts and some coffee in the mornings for that local school. Get in there, get in those buildings because, they need us. Now more than ever, they need us.
And real quick, Dr. Newkirk, just to your point, again, you gotta go to the website. We focus on the Kingdom Project 2025. So it says Conservation, Preservation, Celebration Campaign. So we got people from the community over the last 2 years to adopt different streets in the community. That's the conservation. So we got the young and the old coming together every 3 months. Not only clean up the old schoolhouse, but clean up respective streets in the community. So we got the community behind us. We got city council behind us. We have landmark status going on right now as we speak. The mayor's behind us. That question was posed by the state. Why would you preserve a teacherage without a school? That's like preserving a parsonage without a church.
So if you got everybody behind you, why don't you give them an answer? I'm not trying to put you on the spot.
No,
because if you got those kind of folks, you should be able to come up with an answer. I would ask you the same thing. Why should I help you when you're not articulating to me why I need to? That's something that you guys need to do.
One answer might be, without a teacher, you don't have a school.
That's a no-brainer, right?
Yeah, when we say Rosenwald Schools, we're talking about communities and teachers. They're the people. Now, granted, there was so much put into the design, we know that, but we're talking about people. And so that's a space where the teachers were housed. So, they're critical to that school. Yep. I want to share this with you all because I know we're running out of time here. This is a curriculum on the history of black education in North Carolina that was sponsored by the North Carolina African American Heritage Commission. If you guys want some examples of lesson plans that you can use, you can scan the QR code. That's the address up there. There is a module specifically on Rosenwald Schools where it's similar to one of the projects you heard where students find the Rosenwald school closest to them. But please use that as you want to and as you can. Share that around. And then I know we're at time, but the last thing I just want to say is Dr. Kelly mentioned this quote last night for those of you that were there, but Amanda Gorman in her brilliant poem, The Hill We Climb, said, "Being American is more than a pride we inherit. It's the past we step into and how we repair it." And I am so thankful for these 4 teachers and the other teachers in North Carolina who are like them, because every day they step into the classroom and do this work, they are repairing. And that helps us all. For those of you here to learn about Rosenwald Schools, to preserve them, doing the work that you are doing, you are repairing, and we cannot thank you enough to take your time to care and then to act on that care. And so thank you to all of you, and can we give another big thank you to these 4 amazing teachers.
Wonderful. Well, first I wanted to give just another round of applause for our most recent presenters, but also everyone that we've been able to hear from this week. As we've shared multiple times throughout our time together, we were incredibly fortunate to have support from our leadership at the North Carolina Department of Natural and Cultural Resources to put on this event, and I'm so grateful to have each and every one of you out to be able to connect with you and to be able to learn with you. And one of my hopes from this convening is that this is not the last time that we hear from each other. So I want us to continue the conversation. We've had several questions about resources and where do we get this and all of this. My team is going to be working to pull together what we're able to share. I know a number of presenters were willing to share slides. We have resources, we have email addresses, things that you might have grabbed pictures of on your cell phone, but we also want to make sure that you have it easily accessible in one place. And I also would like to, when I say continue the conversation, it's one of those, how can we at the African American Heritage Commission and how can we at the North Carolina Department of Natural and Cultural Resources continue to support you all in your work and kind of continue to hear from you. What all are the things that you're looking for? What are the things that you need? So it's one of those, we're hearing about preservation concerns. We're hearing about, grant opportunities and different things like that. If we can say, oh, we've had this many constituents, we heard back from all these folks who attended convening, these are the things we need, I can bring that back to leadership and say, all right, so what are we going to do about it? So thank you again so much for attending. I know a lot of you traveled from near and far, and thank you for sticking it out to the bitter end. I know we're getting towards Friday and traffic and all of that, so I do just want to say thank you so much for joining us, and thank you so much for the work that you do. I'm so appreciative of the work that you all do every day, and have a great weekend.
Thank you.